This book I've called Imagine If You Can. I think most of the poems that are in it I've read in other books, but I wanted to put together a book about imagination. The continental drift of things. Imagine there's a fire beneath the sea, and every day the world is born anew. Imagine, if you can, that there might be a floating isle, and on the isle you. And imagine that you're on a world cruise with ports of call in India or France, not the kind where you can pick or choose, but one where everything is left to chance. Or you're a pebble on the island shore, then later high up on a mountain station with a Himalayan point of view. What's more, is done without a change of habitation. For in this scheme of planetary changes, what have been lonely seashores for a while sometimes give birth to lofty mountain ranges, should chance arrange a meeting isle to isle. What stranger things can Gulliver have seen, Brobdingnagian or Lilliputian, than fires beneath the sea and isles in motion? What stranger things could be than what have been? Robert Frost has said that a poem is when an emotion has found its thought, and the thought has found its words. And he said, a poem begins as a lump in the throat, a sense of wrong, a homesickness, a lovesickness. But I believe there's another kind of poem that begins in the imagination rather than with an emotion. An example might be Coleridge in Xanadu did Kubla Khan, a stately pleasure-dome decree. I've looked at my own poems and picked a few that I feel begin in imagination, and I've gathered them in this little book I call Imagine If You Can. Poems that begin with an emotion have an advantage in that we share the emotions, and so the poems connect us to one another. Those that begin in the imagination may require us to step out of ourselves and, in effect, go to Xanadu. A Stardust Song. What if you were stardust, and what if I were too? Would you sing me a stardust song if I sang one with you? What if the earth were round and the Milky Way were flat and orbits were elliptical? Now, what would you think of that? What if you and horny toads both had DNA? And what if you were relatives? Then what would you say? What if dinosaurs laid eggs and some of them had wings? And what if they had gizzard stones? Could you believe such things? What if everything it is were once a tiny dot? Stars, you, me, everything. Would that be wild or not? What if you were stardust? And what if I were too? Would you sing me a stardust song if I sang one to you? The Milky Way. How is it, after wanderers for ages had looked up and seen in starry forms imagined there the creatures of their earthly dreams, that one would come to dream who knew that what is seen depends on view, and that a band across the skies could be a disk that lies edgewise? How is it someone looks at night and sees the same stars others do, but sees them shine in different light, and in old stars sees something new? I think there must be no feeling quite like suddenly understanding something in nature which you think no one may have understood before. Think of how Thomas Wright must have felt in 1750 when he imagined that the Milky Way might appear as it does if you were looking at a galaxy edgewise. How is it someone looks at night and sees the same stars others do, but sees them shine in different light, and in old stars sees something new? The turquoise sea. I dreamed a treasure's hiding place was like a snow-white strand between a jeweled turquoise sea and some exotic land. And in my dream, the sea had gone 1 billion years ago. But still I'd find a treasure strand. For looking, I would know that some things tell of vanished seas and some of vanished land. And finding both, I'd look between and find a treasure strand. And in the strand, the treasure trove, the vision promised me. But morning's finger touched the dream that held the vanished sea, and suddenly space changed to time, and in between to now. And there I found a treasure strand. The likeness showed me how. Out on the edge, where you can see 2 billion years ago, there's an ancient pinyon tree and a sitting rock I know where you can sit and think of time that made the world so. Sometimes on a summer day, when nothing stirs the air, it seems that time's gone away and left space timeless there. But then the distant river's voice calls up to let us know that what we call tranquility comes from chaotic flow. Through the caverns of the mind, unmarked pathways twist and wind. Shadows dance on every wall, and from the darkness sirens call. Of what dancing shades reveal what is dream and what is real. Where is truth when sirens sing? Beware, beware, test everything. The magic ring. One autumn morning in the early dawn, I pushed off from the shore into a fog so dense it seemed that all the compasses of earth were gone. No bird called from the shore and no sun shone. And as I drifted there, I dreamed, and time began to slow, then stopped, or so it seemed. And I was drifting in the void when time had not begun, when all the world's myriads were one, and nothing was before. And there we drifted, time and I, as derelicts in trackless space, and would have drifted endlessly, but for the water's saving grace. For from the tip of a suspended oar a droplet fell, and formed a circle there. And looking at the widening magic ring, time saw its polar star once more. Time's arrow flew ahead again. A breeze disturbed the morning air. A crow called out and wakened me. A heron moved along the shore. The castaways. A saying in the search for gold was gold is where you find it. That nature has chaotic rules or none at all to bind it. But things have turned out differently, though no one could have dreamed as much. For who could dream that this would be? That these two mine walls, which I see and reaching widely I can touch, were once two drifting castaways from island arc and ocean floor, that Friday-like and Crusoe-like, they washed upon our western shore to find their other castaways, and with them form a new domain where there had been no land before. And gold, which seemed a random thing, scattered by some power above, is really golden filigree that binds two strangers caught by love. I found a template in my mind. It cast a shadow on the ground, which a hidden world defined, and a hidden treasure found. Is discovery defined by the hidden treasure found where the shadow marked the ground, or by the template's shadow on my mind? Scarlet Gilia. In the torn earth, along a mountain road, where progress had made nature a confusion of scarred and upturned rocks and roots laid bare, I found the scarlet Gilia in profusion, as if it were its native meadowland. There seemed to be more there than anywhere, as if it meant to prove some vital point or send some message I could understand. Whether its intent, I didn't know, its language being different from ours, but it seemed to be that it was telling me by its presence in a place tormented so, that rough and stony as may be my hours, they will blossom like a meadow full of flowers. Cordillera. Fragments of forgotten lands, rafted on forgotten seas, welded to the western strands like some gigantic marquetry, all inlaid with gold between. Time's mosaic of what has been, portending what is yet to be. Canyonlands. Where is the confluence in the mind, where hidden likeness is combined, and where the arch through which we see as one what once were two or three, and from the chaos of what flowed as symmetry appear and grow, and where the trail that enters in and shows and fades and shows again, and who the traveler in whose eyes the hidden land of beauty lies. What Tracy found. Just looking at the clay, how did she know? Did something call her by her name or sing? Some hidden being waiting there below the smooth and wordless surface of the thing, to be brought back to be alive again? Some hidden likeness to something she knew, some vision of her past, someone she'd been, some truth. It was as if she had seen through a mirror to a secret world behind, and by a sleight of hand made that world be, a new world with its treasure still to find. And so she saw where no one else could see, and moving all the covering dross away, found Aphrodite in a block of clay. Who is this knocking at my door, with hidden face, in cloak arrayed? Ah, I have known this one before. This time he comes in masquerade. Unity in variety. All seemed random, meaningless, but fate led to a key to a hidden likeness, all rhyme and symmetry. And what had been variety, each part a different name, reflected now a different light, and all became the same. Spirit of the inner maze through which my rivers run, I thank you for the day of days when I first looked in different ways and saw that two were one. Tell me, love, relate to me your every tale, your odyssey. What have you been that now you're a spirit on a circling star? What Ithaca did you call home? Where have your youth's companions gone? On what blue seas, what winds of chance, by what strange chain of circumstance have you come here to me and mine from stardust through the mist of time? The poem Tell Me Love is a poem about love which starts with imagination. It imagines love as having been born in stardust and having followed the course of evolution to be what we feel between us now on Earth. Here's another poem about the stars and love. It starts with emotion and tries to find a thought and words to make the emotion indelible. Tell her stars. Where are you, stars? Why are you hiding out of sight? I want to look into her eyes. I want to tell her I remember. Tell her, stars. Tell her if you see my love tonight. That's the end of that one. This book is called Memories of War. It's a little different because only part of it's poetry. Robert Burleson, American Cemetery, Epinal, France. If he knew fear, I did not see. He was a brother's arm to me, and when he fell part of me. November 9th, 1944. My 19th birthday. We stand in the woods in the Vosges Mountains in Lorraine and sing several hymns before going into combat. Among them, I would be true, and I need thee every hour. Before we can disperse, shells begin exploding in the trees above us. Johnny Chilemi is our first fatality. After dark, I'm sent to the company command post on some errand. I poke a twig in my eye and make my way almost blindly. The infantry scout. In bare December woods we lie, on frozen ground, to wait and try to look through distant trees to see if we will live or we will die. No hero's choice has put me here, caught between two kinds of fear. One of safety, bought with scorn, and one of duty, bought most dear. At a hushed command I rise. To those behind, I am their eyes, or more, their blind man's cane that probes until it meets with some surprise. And now, I fearful move ahead toward the forest's hidden dread, true to them and true to me. There's little more that can be said. A night in November, snow and mud. We marched 13 miles to capture a town. Several German soldiers fall in with our column thinking we're retreating Germans. We capture them when we hear them speak. Christmas Eve, 1944. The open, rolling hills near Renling, France, are covered with snow. Burley and I huddle in a hole. A flare brings momentary daylight, and then it's night again. In the distance, but too close, the sound of German tanks on the move. It's mid-January, 1945. Robert Burleson, Burley, dies of wounds received when the company is overrun. Bold, cautious, true, and my loving comrade. That's Walt Whitman. Epinal. It seems unfair, considering all, that I am here in this place now with 90 summers on my brow, and you are there in Epinal, among our comrades sleeping there, that I can hear the robins sing and see the almond tree in spring, and you are there. It isn't fair. Flowers, if you grow in Epinal, grow near where Robert lies. I will dream that he has eyes and see some fairness after all. Sometimes I've Googled my poems to see if they've been used. I found the poem Epinal in the book The Wind and the Grass by James McGuire. I found that Jim and his wife, thinking I had died, went in 2012 to the American Cemetery in Epinal, in Lorraine, and Jim read the poem at Robert Burleson's grave. Then he tucked it in the ground next to the marker. How wonderful of them. In the book, All Quiet on the Western Front, the German soldier is at last killed on a day so quiet. The Army report for that day was all quiet on the Western Front. On such a day, Staff Sergeant Richard Polimus, Old Greenwich, Connecticut, a good soldier, was killed near Rimling, France. I can hear him as he sings, "Darling, je vous aime beaucoup. Je ne sais pas what to do." He was sitting defiantly on the edge of his foxhole when a mortar shell found him. This is called The Meeting. Once, in a contested place, I met a soldier face to face. We stopped and turned and walked away, both to live another day. I often wonder who he was, where he is, whom he loves, and if he ever sees, like me, a soldier in his memory, or if before the end he fell, leaving only me to tell of our meeting face to face once in a contested place. Heilbronn. I remember the river, the small boats, and the far shore, and beyond the broken wall, the buildings torn by war, and fallen comrades. I remember the catwalk in the factory, the voices down below, the grenade that fell among us, as if warning us to go. I remember midnight, and vivid in my mind, retreat, the burning catwalk, safety, but a comrade left behind somewhere in the dark. And I remember morning, and Roski coming back unharmed. The salt mine, Fort Chester Merrill, American Cemetery, Nancy, France. We had crossed the river in those small boats, and as we ran toward the wall, I was hit, and the medics, without hope, carried me to the command post and laid me among my dying comrades. They say where we crossed the river, there's a salt mine, and that they found there hidden treasures, thousands of paintings, and other things unimaginable. There was a Rembrandt among the paintings, and the ancient stained glass windows, 12th to 14th centuries, from the Cathedral of Strasbourg. The Nazi officers had orders to destroy it all, the so-called Nero Decree. But in the confusion of our attack, the miners prevented the mine from being destroyed. And an American officer who knew of the treasures appeared at the mine in time to keep it from flooding. And everything was saved. I wish that as I lay there with my comrades, we had known of the Rembrandt and those windows. This is a little short story in two voices. Voice one. It was the last major battle of the war, but of course we didn't know that. It had lasted 9 days so far, largely because they couldn't get tanks across the river. At the edge of town, away from the river, were two large hills, from which our artillery observers could direct fire. And as long as we held these, it wasn't over. I was in command of a small group of a dozen officers and enlisted men, SS, Volkssturm, even Hitler Youth, who came together through the chaos of the 9 days and now found themselves in a hidden underground bunker at the base of one of the hills, waiting and watching, the only barrier to the hill. We had been in this place for a night and into the next day, when about midday, an American patrol appeared, working its way up the hill. First a scout, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could tell the squad leader was number 2. Now they were all in our rifle sights. Easy prey. I held up my hand and quietly gave the command, hold your fire. And that's how our war ended. As they passed out of sight, someone began to sing, and then all of us. We sang all of the old songs we had sung in victory and defeat, and could not command our tears. We knew the hilltop to be unoccupied. We waited. In about an hour, they appeared again, coming back. Now they could hear the singing, and they crawled toward the bunker. The squad leader called, "Come and see us, Hand and Hulk," which we did. We had heard that many captives had been shot, and we could only hope, and we were lucky. The American squad leader was a boy of no more than 19. We had left our weapons in the bunker, were relieved of things like binoculars, and were taken to their command post. Home became a possibility. Voice 2. It had been about 9 days since we crossed the river. In spite of all the casualties, my squad, already down to 8, hadn't lost anyone, despite leading the crossing, being trapped, and having a grenade fall in our midst. We were unscathed. The company had now fought through the town and was at the foot of the hill from which the Germans had been directing artillery fire. We had been there overnight, and in the morning the platoon commander told me they didn't know whether the hill was still occupied, and my squad was to find out. At that time, the squad, as best I can recall, consisted of Duke Rebello, 1st Scout, Calvin Kemble, Emmett Jordan, Frank Roski, Joe Stern, Harry Smith, Telesforo Albenga, and me. So we started out. At the base of the hill was an alley which we had to cross. Fearing it might be raked by fire, as we crossed it, we crossed very quickly, all except Joe Stern, that is. Joe hadn't quite grasped the idea, and he stopped in the alley to look both ways. but there was no fire, and we proceeded on, spread out in a line toward the hill. I don't remember anything about the ascent, but at the top, we found no one, and we started back by the same route. We had nearly reached the alley when we heard singing coming from a bunker or cellar. We crawled toward it, and when we reached it, I called Commonwealth, Hen and Hoke, come out, hands high, and they did. There were a dozen or so of them, officers and enlisted men. They had decided their war was over. We took them to company headquarters. I have a pair of binoculars I took from their commander. It was clear that had they chosen, they could have easily killed us all as we passed them on our way up the hill. There are three to whom I know I owed my life during the war. Two were German. One of them, this officer who must have said, "Hold your fire." I believe our last action during the war must have been on April 14th, 1945, for that was the day Jimmy Rambert was killed. The war in Europe ended about 3 weeks later. On that day, we were advancing through farm country and meeting some resistance. I remember a field we had to cross and that there was some rifle fire. I remember running and making it across the field to a barn. There was an oat bin in the barn, and I fell on the oats in a fetal position and shook. Then after a few minutes, we regrouped and moved on. But that was pretty much the end of the war, although we didn't know it. Talking to a high school class about the war. When I talk to them about the war, I tell them of the ones we left behind to be gold stars in grieving window panes. How if you live, they're what you think about, and glory isn't even in your mind. And what of those caught in your rifle sight? Those too you think about, for they as you, trudged in the mud, lay fearful in the night, and dreamed of home. Those too you think about.